What do you see over there, Kip?
A whale.
A whale? Really? What kind of whale?
A big whale.
Hi.
Whale.
You think there's a whale? Over there? So we're just catching this before the sun goes down, but there's this huge long line of people and we're all gonna go see a big dead whale, because that's what you do on a Friday evening in Anchorage, I guess. Way in the distance, I can see this huge shape with this little line of these dots, almost like ants, just, you know, making this little marching line way over to it. Okay, there you go. All right, watch out, it's a little icy, okay?
So big and beautiful, huh, bud?
It definitely smells like a whale. And Kip just got to fulfill his lifelong dream of sitting on a whale.
I mean, I thought it would smell worse, but I got a good whiff just then. I'm sorry. Wow. Yeah, we're gonna give the whale some space. Oh, do you see that? That's its mouth.
Sun's going down. Quick sketch of this fin whale. See how this goes.
Smile. Say cheese.
I mean, it's wild to think like this thing was moving. It's so huge, but it's kind of weird to see it still. So if I did this right, I should be able to get it swimming again. Sun's down, time to follow the long line of people all the way back. Like, I love how it's such an event. There's a big dead whale and like all of Anchorage turns out. Like this is the place to be. Like there's this huge line of people, but it's not going anywhere. Like that thing is frozen in. But I mean, there are tons of whales that come to Alaska. Like Alaska is actually kind of like the hot spot for whales in a lot of ways. As soon as I got back, I had to make a painting. Well, actually, I made 4. Because it was just one of those experiences that just kind of got stuck in my mind. But mostly I was thinking about that whale and all the other amazing cetaceans that swim to and from Alaska. And I wanted to share them. So here's 4 of my favorite whales and how to paint them. Let's start with the fin whale, because it's the second largest whale and doesn't get nearly enough love. So we're going to start with the outline, which is actually kind of a pretty simple thing. Most whales are kind of the same shape. When it comes to painting the whale, it's actually pretty simple. I add just this thin strip of indigo to the top, kind of making sure I get all of those nooks and crannies. And then I just add some water right to that layer and just let it kind of flow up, being a little careful about that jaw area. This is going to create something called a bloom, which is that really cool watercolor texture that just matches the whale so perfectly. Once it's dry, I'll add those little tiny thin delicate lines and then fill in that fin. And just like that, we're almost done, because the last thing is to add that little tiny eye, which is actually like the size of a dinner plate. And there you go, a fin whale. These things can grow to like 88 feet and weigh 80 tons. And then next up, let's paint a bowhead whale, which is a super cool shaped whale that can live over 200 years old. It's going to start with an outline, which is kind of a cool shape with that huge, massive head. There's no dorsal fin on these whales because they live in such cold water, but there are 2 blowholes. Next, I add just a few little markings for those white patches, and then indigo in 2 big stripes, adding a bit of that water in between to let that cool texture sort of take over. More indigo goes on below and on the tail to kind of get those really dark spots. Then comes this massive jaw, which is kind of dark but also has that kind of white marking on it, so I want to kind of avoid that, almost carving it out of the paper itself. It might feel like you're going too dark, but watercolor always dries lighter, so don't be afraid to go a little bit bold. And finally, once it is dry, it's time to add that little tiny dot for the eye of the super, super, super old whale, which is actually surprisingly frisky for something that's almost 2 centuries old. Like, they can breach almost entirely out of the water, which is crazy. But there's a bowhead for you. And now I'll go to basically the opposite side of the spectrum, with a beluga whale. And of course I'm going to paint that beluga with a baby beluga as well. And yes, that song is now stuck in my head for the next 1 to 2 weeks. So it's going to start with an outline, and then you're practically done, because it is a white whale. Once you have both of those sketched out, you're going to mix up just a little bit of brown and blue and something that's a little off-white, and basically just paint an outline around your beluga. Then you use some clear water on your brush to basically let it fade into the whale. And it should look something a little bit like this. It might take a little bit of extra work around the head and that really interesting forehead. Then, while it's still wet, you can add a little bit more paint or water to some of those areas to kind of bring out the highlights or shadows. The baby beluga is a bit different because these little whales don't actually turn white for like almost 8 years. So I use a mix of purple and blue to kind of create that gray. Once it's all dry, I add a little bit more lines to kind of get some of that definition in the shadows. And then there you go, a baby beluga in the deep blue sea. Even though they're small whales, they are super, super smart. They've actually rescued a bunch of people before because they understood they were in distress. And they're called the canaries of the sea because they're so chatty. And then the fourth and final whale is the humpback, which is one of my favorite. They travel between Alaska and warm waters like Mexico or Hawaii. So we'll get a little outline in here, and I'm just going to add a little baby humpback whale. Well, I mean, not little, they're like 16 feet long when they're born. But I'm going to start with this little layer of blue for that kind of lighter underbelly, and that gives us a chance to dry as well. For those top layers, I'm mixing purple and brown and indigo, just a whole bunch of colors which make this really kind of complex gray. It's all just a version of gray, really. But it bought me enough time for the rest to dry, and now I have time to add these little delicate lines on the chin. It looks like corduroy, but it's kind of how the whale's mouth expands to take those big gulps of water and krill. Then we basically copy and paste the same colors to the baby on top, which gives the rest time to dry. Once that's dry, we're going to add in that color for the fins and those last little details. Got to get that intelligent eye, and there you have a humpback whale, which is just one of the many whales that would consider Alaska home. Oh yeah, what was there a big whale?
Yay. Yay, real.
Really?
Yay, real.
A giant whale?
Yeah.
Wow, what was it doing?
A mouse. A mouse. A mouse.
It had a mouth.
Oh, a mouse. Yeah? A giant whale?
Did it have a tail?
Oh.